Thomas Green here with Ethical Marketing Service. On the episode today, we have Steve Smith. Steve, welcome.
Thomas, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
It is very much my pleasure. Would you like to take a moment and tell the audience a bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. I have an executive coaching company. I've been doing it now since 2008, and we principally work with either people at higher levels in larger companies or small business owners. And it's all with the idea of helping them develop into a better version of themselves so they can be more successful at the line of work that they've chosen. Um, Prior to that, my entire career was in consumer products manufacturing, and there is where I learned most of what I'm able to teach my clients today. So it's turned out to be a very utopian existence for me, so to speak, because for the first time in my plus 40 years of being in business, I feel like what I'm really good at, I'm actually spending all of my day doing.
Yeah, that makes work a little bit easier when you get to do that, right?
It does.
As opposed to hating what you're doing each day. Certainly preferable. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we are going to talk about the topic of what you call clout today. And it's a very interesting subject. I've not discussed it on the podcast before. So would you like to open with what is clout?
Yes. One of the things, and I guess one of the best byproducts of what I do professionally is that I'm exposed to what other people aspire to become and what they're lacking or what they feel like they're being held back from in their ability to get there. And frequently, when I'm talking to people in more of executive level roles where there's a certain presence that needs to be in order to be effective in the job that they have, because as you get to higher levels in an organization, you're actually responsible for physically doing less. You don't have your hands on the development of the product or the application of the service at the lower levels. A lot of what you do is guidance and critical thinking and decision making and delegation and all the things that other people rely on because they look at you as the leader. So many people today have risen up to those higher ranks, and along the way, they've never really feel like they've been able to gain that control that influences and impacts what other people do. And what I've termed it is a lack of clout. The way they show up, the way they interact, the way they carry themselves is not good enough for other people to say, that person is really good at what they do. I really like how they handle themselves. I like where they're going. I'm willing to follow them. I might not always like what they tell me or the opinion that they have, but I believe that they have what I need to be successful. That's clout. And it's not something you talk about. It's something that just emulates from you. And people can sense it and they can pick it up. And it's a culmination of all the things you do every day that other people sitting back, in other offices down the hallway, around the room, they might never say anything, but they're looking at you and saying, what's he going to do that I would be willing to emulate? And when you understand the makeup of that and you realize how to incorporate that into how you show up and how you perform, you've achieved clout.
It's a very interesting topic, and I like the way that you described it as like a type of presence that someone has. I'm a sort of I have the opinion that if you and I were to, let's say, look at some examples, we'd be able to tell who has clout and who doesn't in our minds. But
Mm-hmm.
in terms of how to describe it, I find that actually quite, I find that the challenge. So if someone were to attempt to figure out whether they had clout, what would they do?
Uh, the first thing that I would suggest people do, and this is the hard part, but you have to get over this if you're really going to make an effort at walking down this path. Find a few people in your inner circle. We all have an inner circle. It's people, whether they're family members or personal friends or work colleagues, that we've allowed to get close to us. They're in that layer where we will confide and talk to them and reveal things about ourselves. that we're not necessarily going to tell people that live, that at church you see once a week and they're nice people, but you don't really know them that well. So find a few of those people that are interested enough in your well-being that they would be willing to be candid with you if you ask them a few very pointed questions. And what you sit down with them and just say, look, Bob, when you look at everything that I do, how I show up, how I interact with other people, how would you describe that? What do you think my role and my value is as somebody else would see it? Try to get outside of your own head. One of the problems that we all have as humans is we have two views of the world. We have the view from in here that we see, and it goes through filters and perspectives and biases and all the things that we grow up with. And then there's the other view of what people have of us that they see from outside looking in. That's the view you want to be connected with. Because as people see you throughout the day, the week, the month, whatever the frequency is of contact, that perspective of who you are and what you're capable of, and are you valuable enough that I should get close to you? I should learn from you. I should follow you. I should work closely with you. That's the perspective you want to be able to tap into. So the only way to do that is to find a few people who are willing to be brutally honest. And when I've done this in the past, I've always said, look, I'm looking for unfiltered candor. Don't tell me what you think I want to hear. Tell me exactly what you see. That's what's most important to me. And when you find people that are willing to do that in a professional manner, give you just observations, that kind of stuff is what you can take away and say, okay, if that's where I know I need to be, I'm on the right track. Most of the time it's not. Most of the time there are things that you will find out about yourself that you need to course correct. If it's really uncomfortable for other people around you, you need to find a way to eliminate it. If it's a tweaking mechanism where maybe you're on the right track, but you're not just doing it the best that you could, you're not getting the reaction from others that you really want. I'll give you a great example where this pops up a lot. You have people that rise up into organizations where now they're invited into the boardroom to have strategic meetings with other members of a particular company or organization. And month after month after month of showing up, they find themselves feeling, not really, but feeling somewhat invisible. People don't acknowledge them. People don't listen to them. People don't allow them to participate. They're kind of like wallpaper. And I get clients all the time coming to me saying, how do I change that? How do I become visible? How do I become impactful to where other people recognize that what I contribute has value? The huge problem today in society at multiple levels. And it's only because until you get yourself out of that mindset and start really realizing where your true value is, and you have the inner confidence to display it and to offer it up, you'll continue to feel like wallpaper. So that's what I tell people all the time. Find a few people that will be brutally honest with you, ask them the question, and then sit back and listen.
I think that's a really worthwhile exercise. One of the things that I have wondered about, and it's something that I'd like to get your opinion on, which is, are the majority of people ready for honest feedback? Or because I think the telling people what they want to hear is that serves a purpose, meaning
Mhm.
that a lot of people can't handle the truth about themselves in some instances.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that topic?
I would agree with you. I think the vast majority of people will tell you that they want to know, but they want to know on their terms. They don't want to be insulted. They don't want to be demeaned. They don't want to feel broken more than they might be feeling currently when they come to you. So when people come to me and ask me things like that, I always couch it in a measure of really trying to check them to make sure that they're mentally ready for that discussion. So typically, what I will say is, I'm glad you asked. I have a few observations that I think you might benefit from. Are you open to hearing them? Now, I haven't told them your behavior sucks or your interpersonal style is offensive. I haven't just hit them right in the forehead right off the bat. They're observations. And observations aren't always accurate. It's just what I see of you. And it could be the time and the place and whatever you did before you showed up. All those things should be kind of considered. But observations are things that people can work with. So if I'm asking somebody else, I'm saying, look, I don't want to put you in a position where you're feeling uncomfortable, but I value you as a friend and how you work. And I would like your observations on what you think I could change that would make me more effective. That word change is a big one because it doesn't denote good or bad. It's just different. And most of the time, that's what people need to do. They just need to do things differently.
I think that's a very clever way to go about it. And again, mature from both perspectives. On the one hand, you're asking for honest feedback. On the other hand, you're not just blatantly insulting someone. So I think that's good advice. The way I imagine that person being, if they're, as you said, invisible, is that there's a body language problem in the sense that they might be, I think, confident. They might be unconfident in the way that they sort of present themselves, and they're also not sure about the way they want to communicate their ideas. So they might self-doubt a little bit as well. So let's
Yes.
say that person is seeking advice, or let's say that you've highlighted that that's an issue. What's next for them? What would you do, or what would you help them with?
Okay, so I can basically play off of a live example that I'm working with right now. I have a gentleman in a very heavy technology company. They build a lot of items for companies that are done under NDA provisions. Nobody can know about it. So he's very, very technically astute in his engineering work. But when he gets into project reviews, meaning people from all different departments assemble, they take a look at one central project they're working on for a client, and everybody gets an opportunity to talk about how that project is moving forward. So there's a lot of interaction. And many times it's not coordinated interaction. It's just people throwing things out and saying, yeah, that works, or no, I've got a question about that. And so you have a lot of this kind of unstructured dialogue going on from a group of people around the table. For someone who has a lack of confidence in what they say or what they contribute, that's an absolute minefield. Nobody will ever show up and be willing to say something if they feel that somebody else around the table is going to stick a knife in what they have to say. So these people will basically sit back, they'll listen, they'll learn a lot. They might even see a problem that nobody else has talked about that could deep six the whole project, and they won't say anything in public because they have a fear of how it's going to be responded to. They don't have enough inner confidence in the things that they see or the opinions they convey to withstand what they think might happen. So the end result is they just stay mute. They don't say anything. They wait until the meeting's over, and they might go to somebody's office and say, hey, I saw this. I just kind of wanted somebody to know, even though the best time to have said it was during the meeting, but that's the worst time for them. So when I run into someone like that, what I try to get them to realize is at that moment, at that psychological decision where you've decided not to speak up, what are you feeling? What's happening in your head that's making you decide this is more of a fear situation for you than just raising your hand? My favorite tactic is I don't just try to steal a microphone and just blurt out whatever's going on in a meeting. I will look at whoever's running the meeting, whoever's at the front, and I just basically put up one finger. And when people see that, they know I'm getting ready to make a statement. And so they're, all right, well, Smith, what do you want? Fine, the door's open. But I'm not going to compete with anybody else who's yelling and screaming and out of control. I just basically let them know I've got something to say. It's your choice as to whether you want to give me the microphone or not, but I'm ready. So that's what I teach people who have a fear of jumping in and just getting caught up in the morass of discussion. Let people know you have something to say. Clear the decks so that you can step in and say what you have to say. So it's small things like that that help build confidence to speak up and let your thoughts and opinions be known.
I think it's a good way of, should we say, overcoming that initial fear. What about those instances where they do feel a little bit like their idea is attacked or not taken seriously? Any thoughts there?
Yes. The other way is how you serve it up. Many times when people will respond or open up about something that they see going on in front of them, many times people start off their remarks with some kind of judgment factor. They immediately say something like, I don't know if that's right. And then they try to get in whatever comment they've got going. Or, I don't want to offend anybody with what I'm about to say. Well, guess what? Everybody around the table is waiting to be offended at that moment. So, what I try to get people to do is when you make your comment, make it judgment neutral. Based on what everybody's talking about and what I see on the screen, here's what I'm thinking. Now, you haven't offended anybody or stuck a dagger in anybody's opinion, but guess what? There's at least one other person around that table who's thinking the exact same thing, and they don't have the courage to say it.
Yeah.
So when you start opening up like that, or another good tactic is, I'm curious about what you guys have talked about during this phase. It's kind of unclear to me, and this is kind of what I think is going on. Can anybody help clear that up for me? A little bit of a vulnerable approach, but you would be amazed at how powerful that comes off, because there are other people around the table and yet nobody wants to say anything. So it's really just a matter of having a comfortable entry into the conversation that will get you the notice you're looking for by simply learning how to enter into a conversation in a way that's not defamatory or accusatory, but just very objective. Even if it means asking questions for clarity, what you do is you gain the trust of people around the table, because now they understand, gee, what he's asking for is what I'm thinking as well. And if you do that a few times as you continue to meet with these folks, the word gets out that, you know what, he's got something to contribute. We should listen to him. And that's really the start of people coming out of their shell, so to speak, and getting more confidence to participate. And it's that participation that everybody else recognizes has value to them.
Yeah, I like that position because I feel like it's sort of similar to what you said about judgment. So if you put forth your idea and you say, this is what I think, and someone comes back and let's say it's a justifiable rebuttal or it's unjustifiable, you're sort of invested in that idea. Whereas your examples you gave, you're sort of opening it up for conversation and you're asking for other people's input. So you're not necessarily saying, this is what I'm advocating for. It's just a open dialogue.
Right. And people appreciate that. I don't know other folks that you have talked to on your program, but one of the things that I've learned, and this is one of these things that I wish I had learned way, way earlier in my former career. People love talking about themselves. And if you can be the catalyst to opening people up and giving them a platform to talk about what's most important to them or what's most interesting to them, they'll tell you anything. And if you do that enough, you can walk away from a conversation and the person leaving you might think you're the smartest person they've talked to all month, and you haven't really said anything. You've just
Yeah, it
asked a
reminds
few
me of
questions to
how to
open
win
them up.
friends and influence people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. None of what I do is proprietary, brand new discovery. I guess the thing that has allowed me to do what I do today with the hundreds and hundreds of companies I've worked with is I've learned and borrowed techniques from other people who are far greater and far more successful than I am. But these are evergreen techniques. These are not things that come and go through the 80s and 90s. They're all part of the human wiring process, and they work now. They're going to work 10 years from now.
Well, I think you've given a good example or should we say description of what clout might look like. The question is around what it doesn't look like, because I think there's some misconceptions about it that maybe you'd be able to share. And one of those, from my perception, is fake it till you make it type attitude where you're more bombastic or a bit aggressive in your attitude. Have you got any thoughts around what it isn't?
Oh yes. And I say this because when I started my coaching business, I was actually part of a very small startup franchise. And the franchise had been assembled with a lot of well-heeled people from other major organizations like Tony Robbins. And Tony Robbins has been successful beyond belief. He's helped thousands and thousands of people. But anytime you have massive organizations like that and people just climbing over each other to get involved, you're going to get a certain percentage of people who do what I call game the system. They're trying to find that shortcut to the top. Slogans like you just mentioned, fake it till you make it, is a very common slogan in those kinds of environments because everybody's trying to cite themselves into success. Okay. To me, that's got a very, very, very high probability of failure. And along with that failure comes a certain negative view of life that is hard to get rid of later on because you almost feel like you've been mentally cheated, into thinking that way and assuming that all you had to do is spout those axioms on a regular basis, and all of a sudden one day you'd be wealthy and everything would be easy. And so when I tell people what clout isn't ego driven. Okay. People with big egos that are aggressive, that want to control other people around them, they tend to wear everything on their sleeves, on their coats, on their hats, whatever. I mean, they're going to tell you whether you ask them or not, because they know how good they are and they want everybody else to know, and they want it to know by how they bring it about. Clout is none of that. People with real clout don't ever mention that kind of stuff. In fact, most of the time they show up in somewhat of a humble type manner. They're very approachable. They're very welcoming. They're very interested in other people. And what can I do to help you reach your goal? Maybe it's nothing, but just the fact that you've told people that, you've asked that, gives people a sense of belonging, a sense of care. Somebody else actually cares about what's important to me. So it's the manner in which you show up and the dialogue that you participate in that conveys who you are as a professional. People that don't aspire to that, the ego-driven ones, the ones that are very aggressive and want to control everything around them, that's not clout. And that kind of thing wears out after a while. You're either going to have the stuff that actually backs up why you're bombastic like that, or you flame out. And when you flame out, it's very difficult to come back unless you go someplace else in a new environment with new people and start all over again with the same bad habits.
Are there any other misconceptions other than the ones we've discussed?
I think the other one is that sometimes people, and again, this is all how people view the world. Everybody has their sense of right and wrong, and what's real and what's honest and what's integrity. But I think that depending on how you as an individual show up and meet somebody like this, sometimes there's a feeling that these people are putting on airs because they're trying to manipulate others. So there can be a perception of manipulation if you focus too much on yourself and not on the people around you. When you're focused on people around you, it's very hard to sell people on the fact that you're manipulating if you're honestly doing things that help them win in their game of life. But if what you're doing seems like it's coming back on you for immediate return, that can be a tough thing to explain your way out of. So I would say manipulation and the ego factor are the two things that sometimes people can associate with someone that has real clout.
Thank you for that clarification. You did say in one of your previous answers around helping people with goal achievement. Have you got any thoughts on the topic of goals and how it relates to clout?
Yes, people with real clout have a real clear sense of purpose. And I talk about this a lot. I've written some articles on it, and I talk with clients about it on occasionally, especially people that are in the small business arena. because small business is largely entrepreneurial in nature. It's all about what you bring to the party, how long you're willing to work, what you're willing to risk in order to get what you want. That's the very definition of people who want to start something up and build it up to where it's a successful venture. And so what I tell people a lot of times is if you have clout, if you're trying to possess that, it's because there's something in your life of purpose that you are continually drawn to. It's what I call having a calling, almost like internal GPS. Regardless of where you are and who you're talking to, it always manages to point you in the same direction, which is different than a lot of people's association with passion. You know, I hear people all the time, follow your passion, do what's passionate. I don't subscribe to that, not because passion's not important, but passion is basically emotional fuel. All right. I have a passion for making my own beer, but I would never want to run a pub. I have passion for riding my motorcycle, but I would never want to be a motorcycle manufacturer. Passions are fleeting. They can change over time. And it's important to have passion about what you're engaged in, but the passion isn't the driver. It's not the end destination. It's the thing that gets you to that point. So people with real clout, they already have a purpose. They know where they're going in their life's path. They know what the end game is. That's the kind of thing that other people will feel. You might never see it because they don't talk about it. You know, when it comes to goals, we have a tendency to want to reassess our goals at the beginning of every year. Kind of like what a lot of people do with New Year's resolutions. I stopped doing that over 10 years ago because I realized that the average person completely loses all desire for whatever they've proclaimed on New Year's Eve by about the middle of February. So resolutions are more ceremonious than they are of conviction. And if you're really looking at how to incorporate goals, you've got to decide, what's my life path first? What am I here to do? What value do I have to extend to others that can be bolted onto that direction? And the longer you stay with it, the less goals become cyclical, and the more it just becomes kind of a running theme of what you're here to do.
Yeah, I much prefer the approach of aspiring for something regardless of the time of year than just, oh, by the way, it's New Year's, therefore I have to have a goal in mind.
I have to lose 20 pounds.
But
Right.
I really like the way that you rephrase it as the calling, your calling in your life. Have you got any thoughts around if people are struggling with the concept of what their calling is, how they might go about finding that?
I think I'm a big proponent of the Pareto principle, which what we commonly refer to as the 80-20 rule. And I believe most of society, probably in that 80% range, has real significant problems with life's purpose. They might, and here's another interesting statistic, and this is not recent, this has been going on for decades. Over 85% of all people that graduate from higher education don't ultimately pursue a career that has anything to do with their education. So right off the bat, we've learned early on that it's okay to leave behind something you spent a lot of time and money acquiring to go after something else that covers an immediate need. And so I think what happens is along the way, people lose touch with what it was they really wanted early on because other things got in the way that were more pressing. So I do believe lots of people have trouble with that. They get into certain careers, all of a sudden 20 years has passed, and they're out of love with it. Now it's a way to make a paycheck, and they're desperately looking to get out, but they can't figure out how to do that. To somebody that I was just chatting with that really had that issue, and it depends on a lot of things. How much people depend on you in your family structure? Are you the main breadwinner, so to speak? How old are you? How much runway do you have in front of you? Back when I was a kid, anybody ahead of me that was broaching 60 years old, I mean, that was the end of life, and a lot of stuff has happened between then and now. And I routinely run into people who are running businesses actively, and they're in their early 70s. So a lot has changed, but a lot also means what's your desire to keep going? Some people will work, and you read about the famous people all the time in their 80s, and until they're still cognitively sound, they're still doing what they love. It's not about the money or the fame anymore. They just love doing it, and it's their way of staying current and relevant and surviving for as long as they can. But most people don't think that way. Most people think compartmentally. This is my life now. I have to do this to satisfy this. I'll worry about tomorrow later. Tomorrow never really shows up. All of a sudden, one day they're at retirement and they haven't really prepared themselves for what that next phase looks like. So early on, what I try to get people to realize is, what do you really want? Because it's the want factor that drives people's desire to change, not what you need. We all endeavor to try to cover our needs, but needs are not the emotional fuel that will actually make you decide to change and go off in a different direction. So until you can clarify what that looks like, and then step back and say, okay, how would I transform myself from where I am now to what I want to be? That could take a year or 2 years. You have, if you're journey focused, you've got to be willing to spend that time doing it. When people come to me and say, can you help me with XYZ? I have 60 days to do it. I basically say, if your business is depending on that, let me show you how to file bankruptcy. Because nothing of that significant changes in 60 days. You took 20 years to get to this point. You're not going to change it in 60 days.
Yeah.
So I think for a lot of people, it's the realization of what's most important to them. And it's the understanding of what it will take from an effort and a time standpoint to ellipse over into doing what they like. A lot of people do. A lot of people do, but a lot of people get stuck and they spend the rest of their life in that stuck mode because they don't know how to take that first step.
I love that topic, and I think you describe it really well. So I appreciate you sharing it. You have used a couple of examples where you've helped people with coaching, but have you got any that you're particularly proud of that you would want to share as examples?
Yes, I had a gentleman that was working for a large educational institute in my area, about an hour away from my office. And he called me one day and he says, I really need your help. My job is on the line. I'm really frustrated. I'm just not able to do well. And I think, I think things are gonna end. And I thought, okay, before I take this guy on, maybe I should drive out and meet him and talk with him and really find out how much of this is real and how much, the fear can cause people to not see things as clearly as they are. So I drove out to his institute. As I was driving into the parking lot, he's standing in the middle of the parking lot waiting for me. So right then and there, I thought, okay, this is serious. Normally, people wait for me to go into the office before, greeting, and he's standing in the parking lot. So we walk into his office, and he kind of lays it all out, and we figure out what the issues are, what he's doing to create them, and what changes he needs to make. And over about a 9-month period, the whole idea was to get him at a stable point where he wasn't fearing that he wasn't doing well enough to keep his job. 9 months into that, not only did he overcome that, but he was offered a vice president's promotion by the head of the university. Now, that wasn't part of the plan. Didn't see that coming. But what it taught me was sometimes people's fear about their immediate circumstances can get so big that it actually clouds out other perspectives around them that might not be that immediate or that bad. And so I really felt good. I felt good that the guy kept his job, but I also felt that what he really knew how to do, which was completely being covered over, now was seen by other people in the university that said, yes, that's what we need to be able to do this and that. And so they offered it to him and he stepped up. So that was a great one. I love that one.
Yeah, it's a great story. Do you think, just your opinion about, was it as bad as he was perceiving it to be?
Um, no, there were bad spots, no question. But what caused him to get that head full of, oh my God, the world's coming to an end, is he wasn't addressing the issue with the source. He was allowing too many intermediaries to take what they knew, what was right, what was fabricated, and kind of work it up and then pass it along. It's the old telephone game.
Mm.
He was playing that because he was going to what was immediate and what was available, as opposed to taking the steps to go address the issue with what the source was. And once he got to the point where he was having meetings with the provost and the other people and showing them what he was trying to accomplish, it changed how they were seeing things, which changed what they were saying to the chain of command that he was ultimately responding to. So the whole idea was, stop listening to all this stuff in the middle, go to the source and check it. Find out if that's actually how they feel, or if there's just a fact that they don't see everything you see, and that's a good time to have that conversation.
Well, it sounds like a very, should we say, beneficial example. If you would like, if there are other people who want to wait in the parking lot for you, where do they find you? How do they get in touch?
The best thing that I suggest for people all the time is go visit my website, which is growthsourcecoaching.com. My bio and my programs and my examples and my tips, I throw a lot of tips out there. I'll give everybody the playbook right up front to see what they can do with it on their own. But I really want people to get to know what I'm all about before they either fill out the little box that they want me to call. Some people just email me directly. It doesn't matter, but get to know me first, because that will really tell me whether you're ready for this conversation or not. Kind of going back to the beginning of this call, you know, if you want to have that conversation and you want to really get insight about where you are and what's left for you to do, learn about me first. And then if you're still inspired, get a hold of me and I'll be glad to set up a phone call or a Zoom or whatever. That doesn't cost anything. I'm more interested in getting people to where they really feel energized that they can do it, that they are on the right track, that they are pursuing the right end game. And if they feel like that, I can show them exactly what they need to course correct to get there.
And what was that website again? Sorry.
Growthsourcecoaching.com.
Okay, thank you for that. And do you have any closing thoughts for us today?
Yeah, and I'm going to throw out a term that I've seen recently from a gentleman who is not living with us anymore, but he had a tremendous impact on business and professionalism in general. His name is Jim Rohn, Rohn. He's got tons of video out on YouTube, and he had one philosophy that I thought, if everybody thought this way, we would have more people feeling satisfied about the journey that they took to reach their own level of success. And here's what he says. He says, spend more time working on yourself than you spend working on your job. Doesn't mean you can't be fully dedicated to your job's work, but spend more time on yourself, because it's the improvement in yourself that allows you to be better at your job, not the other way around. So that's what I would tell everybody. Think first about what you can do to show up and be your absolute best self. And if you're always oriented towards that, you will never be disappointed with the outcome.
Well, I can't help it because one of my favorite Jim quotes is in order to do better, you need to be better. So I'm sure we could exchange Jim Rohn quotes back and forth, but it's a good point to end on.
Good, good.
Steve, thank you very much for being a great guest today.
Well, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I just appreciate the fact that you gave me a platform to let everybody know about it.
It's been great. Thank you very much.